Hello people, Pixel Perfect Dev here. Welcome to a short video on atomic design principles. This topic is super important from a design system perspective, that is when building a design system, and is also a potential front-end interview question. So let's deep dive into it. So this is kind of like chemistry plus coding, wherein we apply the basic concepts of chemistry into our front-end code. So let's revisit the basic concepts. Although I was never good at chemistry, I can help you revisit them, of course. So let's first understand what were atoms. Atoms were the basic building block of all matter. After that, molecules were a combination of one or more atoms. And finally, we have compounds, which is a combination of one or more molecules or atoms. So during our school days, we mainly had two main examples here. For atoms combining to form molecules, we had H2 plus O2 to give H2O, that is water. And for multiple molecules combining to form compound, I think we had H2O, that is water, plus CO2, carbon dioxide, to form something like H2CO3, if I'm not wrong, which is carbonic acid. I don't know how this works honestly. But yeah, with that, let us now differentiate between the chemistry concepts of atomic design with the design system concepts of atomic design. So what are atoms first of all? Atoms are the elements which cannot be further broken into more elements. So technically what are going to be these? These are going to be the components that are built using the native HTML tags such as button or input, etc. So what we are basically going to do is we are going to create a custom button component which uses the native HTML button tag. So this is going to be under atoms, and all the places throughout the design system should have only this button component used, and nowhere else should the native HTML button component should be used. So in the official documentation of atomic design, we have a periodic table of HTML elements mentioned here. So this includes all the HTML tags, and all the types are mentioned here along with the color codes. So if you further scroll down, you will get an atom section here. We have few examples here such as a label, input field, and a search button. So next, what are molecules? Molecules are a combination of one or more atom components. One of the best example would be a form component, which has multiple input fields and a submit button. One other example would also be a search bar component, which has an input field and a search icon button. One very important thing to note here is once you have developed a atom component, you should not be using any native HTML tags inside molecules. You should always be reusing the atom component that is built. Back to the documentation under molecules, we have a simple example of a molecule here. So we have a label at the top along with an input field and a search button. So all these atoms combine together to form a molecule here. So let's talk about organisms. In chemistry, they are called as compounds, but in atomic design, they are called as organisms. So these are a combination of one or more molecule components. In some cases, they also contain individual atom components as well. So one good example would be a header component, which has a logo, a search bar component, and a list of navigation elements which can be wrapped under nav or navbar component. So this is one example. Another example would be a huge form such as a registration form, say, which has multiple sections of form molecule component. In the documentation under organisms, you have a simple example here. This is a placeholder for a logo. This is a navbar which has a list of nav elements here, and the search bar component that we created under molecule. So this is a combination of one or more molecules to form an organism. So let's talk about templates now. These are nothing but entire layout of a page or pages. So what happens here is that the components that you have inside your page are already structured in a layout manner, but the components may change depending upon the page. So one example would be a common layout which has a header at the top and a bunch of components here, and then footer at the bottom. Another example would be little specific. Let's say you have a products layout of an e-commerce website. So here you would have header at the top, and let's say a recent page in between, and your orders, and a footer at the bottom. So this layout is common for the products. You can use this layout for multiple categories such as fashion or electronics in the e-commerce. So this is one example of templates. A quick example on templates here. So in the documentation, you have a header at the top and various components in a structured layout here. So finally, let's talk about pages. These are nothing but specific instances of a template. So like we had a layout template here, which was common for all pages. We can have a home page which uses the layout. This is one example. Other, for the products layout, we would have an electronic products page and maybe a fashion page as well. So these both are the example of products layout. An example of pages from the documentation. Here we have the earlier template applied, and we have the header at the top, and we have actual data added to all the components inside the structured layout. So that's it for this video, guys. Feel free to drop a comment if you liked it or if you have any queries. Meanwhile, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.